what I'm going to be discussing today is essentially the dangers of coming to Australia. Now, I'll qualify that by saying that Australia is one of the safest countries on the planet. We've got an excellent health system. We are used to dealing with, the authorities are used to dealing with people being lost and getting in trouble in places that they probably never should have gone. But it is a free country and you can go pretty much anywhere you want, except for a few restricted places like military installations. Also, there's a lot of indigenous land where you need permission to go. But generally speaking, the majority of the country is free to travel by anyone, anytime. Now, Australia is not devoid of psychopaths. People are people, and if you've got, first of all, I'd like to apologise for the sound of the fan, but it's stinking hot. We're talking mid-April and it's still really, really humid. It rained yesterday a lot, and it's sunny. It's just stinking hot and humid, so I'm sweaty man again. Yeah, but anyway, so the chances of you dying in Australia are pretty slim. As far as because of criminal activity, like being murdered. So like I said, we're not devoid of psychopaths. We have had serial killers, like a guy called Ivan Milat. He was batshit crazy. Now, I've got here an Australian Institute of Criminology study. The murder of overseas visitors in Australia. It is an old study. They obviously haven't done a new one, but it focuses on the year 2005, and you're looking the murder rate of tourists was 0.9 per million short-term visitors to Australia between 1994 and 2003. Sorry, it was published in 2005. So what you're looking at is, I wrote some rough numbers down here. What you're looking at is an important number is 400 tourists a year die visiting Australia for various reasons. Like there's quite a few who drown, especially Asian tourists who don't know how to swim, and they, fantastic, we don't have beaches that we can go to, so we'll just go out, wade into a rip and drown, which is not unusual. If you speak to surf lifesavers, the amount of Asian tourists, that's probably also got to do with the fact that a large majority of the tourists that we get in Australia are Asian, Chinese, or used to be. I don't know that now. So you're looking at 0.01% of tourists visiting Australia die in Australia, that's pretty low. And I would say that 99.9% of the time, the reason that, in fact, I would say 100% of the time, well, no, because some do get murdered. But I would say 99.9% of the time, the reason those tourists died is because they're idiots, and something that's called, that I like to call natural selection occurred. If you're an idiot and you do something and you involve yourself in risky behaviour, well, guess what? The likelihood is it's going to not end well, and it doesn't typically. And we do have a lot of hazards, but you have to remember that something like, 85% of the population in Australia is in urban centres. There's not many people that actually live in the outback for good reason, because it's inhospitable, you know. And I work in my job when I am working. Not probably 95% of the time I am working in the outback and travelling there in vehicles and aircraft. So, I mean, even prior to this job, I was very focused on, you know, if something did happen, that I would know how to survive. So, a bit of education. Now, here's some statistics. 38,000 missing persons 38,000 missing person reports occur each year in Australia. 2,600 of them are long-term missing persons. 0.6 are found dead, which is about 1,800. The Metropolitan Police study said that 95% were adults and 3/4 were men, mostly suicides. So there's some interesting facts. So 400 tourists a year die visiting Australia. But here's some positives. Australia is relatively free from health risks, i.e. viral, bacterial, parasitic. Alright? You're not gonna, you would have to be extremely unlucky to get any of those things. Alright. Public security is good. Okay? It is good. Political stability. We're probably the most politically stable country, on the planet, full stop, because there's not much difference between the parties. Well, there never used to be. I think there is now. Alright. Australia is relatively free from natural disasters. Relatively. So, whoever did this study probably lives in, I don't know, Melbourne or Sydney or somewhere. We do, because Australia pretty much has the gamut of all climate types. We've got everything. We've got ski fields, we've got deserts. We probably haven't got, we do have real deserts. We've got, not alpine, but alpine, mountainous regions. We've got everything. So, yeah, it's a very interesting place. Now, 70% of Australia is considered outback. That's 5.6 million kilometres squared. And as a visual representation of that, I'll do a screenshot. Well, I'll do a shot of it so to show you. If you can see that. So the ochre and yellow bits are outback, dry. Alright, what's it called? Desert and grassland, and that grassland, not a whole heap of grass. So there's a reason why all the capital cities are located on the coast. A very good reason. Now, what am I going to say? If you're travelling, if you're considering coming to Australia and travelling around and travelling in the outback, the number one cause of death is dehydration, because if we're called the dry continent, and we call the dry continent for a reason, because it's dry mostly. Yes, we do have tropical areas. Yes, we do have alpine areas. But we don't have a lot of watercourses, big watercourses in Australia. All of the rivers in Australia combined don't even come close to what the Mississippi is. Right? The amount of flow that the Mississippi has out into the Gulf of Mexico, right, is greater than all of the rivers in Australia combined. So we're a very, very old continent, and most of the rivers are old and slow, and there's not a whole lot of output. Yeah, we do have some fair-sized rivers, but just the comparison of the Mississippi gives you an indication of how dry we are. We're very dry. Now, if if you're considering coming to Australia and travelling in the Outback, carry a lot of water, okay? If you are carrying anything less than 10 litres of water per person in your vehicle, you're putting yourself in serious danger. All right, it's just that simple. That's a minimum. All right. I personally take 20 litres. All right, 20 litres. And and I'm not talking about travelling into the centre of Australia where there's just no one and there's no roads or anything. I'm talking just travelling, because you would be surprised how much water you will go through when it is 45 degrees, and trust me, it gets that hot, and hotter, and hotter. I remember one occasion in the army, we were up in Cape York, and it was so dry and so hot. It was in the 50s, so imagine 54 degrees Celsius. That's how hot it got. I'm not joking, that's not an exaggeration, that's how hot it was. And I went down with heat exhaustion, you know, because it just starts to fry your brain. And I was laughing and crying and just fell in a heap, you know. So I know what it feels like, and your brain can't operate at that temperature, you know. Your body's struggling to keep cool. It just can't, and it can't sweat enough. You know what? I remember that time, because during the day we didn't sweat. We did sweat, but you didn't get wet, because it evaporated immediately. Like, I'm talking immediately. We were completely dry the whole time, which is really unusual. It was so hot. So hydration is number one. All right. You have to carry at least 10 litres, and that would probably last you a couple of days. That's with just surviving. All right, because I remember on that trip I was drinking half a water jerry, which is 10 litres, plus about a dozen soft drinks a day. So I was probably drinking about 14 litres a day. And you would drink a 1 litre water bottle, you would scull it just in one go, and your mouth would be dry again. And like but your body was having trouble processing the water, because it can only process it so quickly, right? Your organs, your kidneys and your renal system can only process that water so quickly and absorb it into the system so quickly, and you were just filling your gut up with water, and it was a shocker. Now, so carry a lot of water, all right? There's no such thing as carrying too much water, as far as I'm concerned, if you're going to travel in the Outback. The other thing that you should take with you if you're travelling in a vehicle, number one, make sure the vehicle is actually suitable, okay? There used to be a company, I don't see them around anymore, there used to be a company who it was a budget rental vehicle company I used to see, because I live, you know, in a rural area in North Queensland, and I used to see these vehicles all the time. They're all just different, usually vans, some sort of van that, you know, and the owners had, I don't know who they were, whether they were graffiti artists or what, but there was always like graffiti art all over them and everything. I don't see them anymore, because I think the authorities went through them like a dose of salts and said, right, get all these vehicles off the road, because they're not suitable. You know, if you're going to travel any serious distance in Australia, your vehicle has to be really, really up to it. And I don't think a lot of them were. Now, the other thing that you should carry with you is food is not such a big thing, because you're going to get found before you starve to death, okay? Sooner or later. Water, completely different story. You know, in a couple of days you can die from dehydration in the Outback, in the serious heat. Now, the other thing you should take with you is a comprehensive toolkit to work on the car. And I know you might say, but I don't know anything about cars. Well, guess what? There's these things. It's called a manual, and it tells you how to repair everything. What, diagnostics, repair, everything. It's not that hard. If you can read, you can follow it. So, no excuse. I get one of them. All right. The other thing is, be aware of where you're going. Preparation. Get yourself a booklet. National parks. It tells you where all the national parks are, the roads, everything. The amount of times that I see tourists travelling during the wet season up here where I live, quite a few. These are people who have not done their research. These are people who are completely unaware of the they'll come north from, who knows, Melbourne, Sydney, Brisbane, up the east coast, and they're completely unaware that we're talking serious tropics. I live in a cyclone-prone area, a flood-prone area. All right. This town where I live is on a floodplain, and it floods a lot. But because it's just so common, the flood comes, the flood goes, you get the water blaster out, clean up, and a week later you wouldn't even know anything happened because we're just so used to it, right? People who aren't used to that freak out. And the amount of people that get caught, right, tourists who get caught either here in this town or somewhere else because of A, floods, or B, cyclones, and they can't travel, and or they've got to hang out for a week or two in one spot, God knows how long, and they run out of money. We never planned for this. Well, hey, do your bloody homework, do some research, don't be an idiot. Alright? Now, as far as, I'll do a water. I'll do a recommendation. If you want to survive in the outback, alright, I don't know if this series of DVDs is still available, but if you can get it, get it. Alright? So, it's a guy called Jack Absalom, and if anyone can be called an expert in surviving in the outback, he can, because he's lived in the outback, for a very long time. I don't know, he's probably passed away now, he's pretty old. He knows everything about it, and this is a 12 DVD set, right? It's well worth it. It's called Jack Absalom's Australian Collection, and it's got everything you need to know about surviving, pretty much everything you need, he doesn't really focus that much on food and whatever, but he does a fair bit. The other thing is a gentleman called Les Hiddens, Major Les Hiddens I think he is, and this is his little bush tucker handbook, which is very handy. It's nice and compact, and it tells you what you can and can't eat. And also he did a whole heap of TV. There's a whole TV series on him. Now, there are and this is Jack Absalom again, Safe Outback Travel. I bought this long time ago. I don't know if you can still get it if it's still in print, but if you can get it, get it. All right. Another guy is called Outback Survival by Bob Cooper, who's a survival expert, but he is. He also, I don't know if you can get this anymore. I got this on special. I don't think anyone was getting it. The Bob Cooper Outback Survival Kit. Now, I am going to do, what I plan to do is a series of vids about various survival books that I've got, and I'll actually use each book and follow that book, see how effective it is. Another really good one is a gentleman called, he's like the grandfather of survival, John Lofty Wiseman, and it's called the SAS Survival Handbook. He's a former SAS if he was an officer or, yeah. Another good one that I bought a very, very long time ago is called Survival by Lex Lanoy and Peter C. Nichols. It's actually a very good book. This is a good book, The SAS Guide to Tracking. So it essentially teaches you to track not only people but animals, because it's pretty handy. Like if you want to get, want to eat an animal. Another good is Australian Nature Field Guide Wild Food Plants. I bought this not that long ago by Tim Lowe. That's a pretty good book. That's just as good as Les Hiddens' one. Now, yeah, I know. All the bushcrafters out there, Dusty, all the bushcrafters out there are going to be saying, oh, you bag bushcraft, and the 10 bushcraft books, very, very handy, okay, for survival. What else? Now, here's another one. Bushcraft 1, Skills of the Australian Bushman. This is about, using various materials and whatnot that are around to make everything, rope, furniture, fences. Really good. I think I've got the second one as well. I don't know where. Something else handy, especially up here, because we've got a lot of coconut palms, because when the British Admiralty, wherever they planned to come back to, they would plant coconuts and they would put goats on islands. On, I think probably most of the islands that are just off the coast where I am here, there are goats, or at least a couple of them. And because coconuts are not native to Australia, but there are a lot of coconuts because the British Admiralty planted them in anticipation of needing, food and something to drink. What's this? How to weave Hawaiian coconut palm fronds. Really handy if you live in the tropics and there's a lot of coconuts, learning how to do that. Another thing is this, what's it called? And if you know Dave Canterbury at all, Woodcraft and Camping by Nesmuk. Now, if you don't know who Dave Canterbury is, well, yeah, you're not really interested in survival, because he's like a big guru. Personally, something else that's interesting is, and this is going to sound bizarre, but it's not, Herodotus, the histories. And why I'm showing this is because there are a lot of myths, and some of the garbage that is in this, dog-headed men, people with their faces, with no heads and their faces in the middle, and he's writing because of accounts of people, on face value. So you need to go past myths and get to the facts. That's important for survival. It's basically a matter of the facts of survival versus the fantasy. All right, because another good one is Commando by a gentleman called Dennis Reitz. This is about the Boer War, and the reason why the Boers, who were very few in number, were so successful is because they knew the land. They lived there. They'd grown up there. They were born there, right? Where when the British turned up, they struggled, and they were arrogant, and they screwed up. They won eventually, just through sheer weight of numbers. Mountains of the Moon. If you've never heard of Sir Richard Burton, not the actor, he was a really, really famous explorer. Very, very interesting about what he did and how he coped. And he went a lot of different places. he did his research. That's why I'm showing him. Sir Richard Burton really did his research. You know, probably wasn't any place that he went to where he did not know the language, so he could communicate with the locals, understand them. That's one of the problems with the early Australian white explorers. To a great degree, they just ignored the local population when they could have really helped them out. Another one is the Lost City of Zed. Okay, and that is about, it's a true story. All right. I mean, I don't know how much truth is in the book, but it's about Colonel Percy Harrison Fawcett, and he was. The reason I'm showing this one is because you need to stay grounded. You need to keep your head out of the clouds, out of fantasy land, and not be obsessed by one aspect of survival, or you know, the gear or this or that, right? Keep, you know, don't have your head in the clouds, and don't be obsessed with some fantasy, right, with regards to survival, because it's pretty easy to do that. The other one is, a good one is the search for the inland sea. So this was one of the myths, that there was an inland sea in Australia. The British were totally, 100% totally sure that there was an inland sea. There isn't. There might have been at one, well, there was at one time, but it's a long time ago. And that was John Oxley, the very famous explorer here in Australia. Now, I'll just, beer, it's hot, it's really hot. I'm sorry for all you teetotalers and wowsers. Well, I mentioned before TV shows. Les Stroud, or Les, as you guys know, so like to pronounce it, Les Stroud. He was the original Survivor Man. He started the genre, and he was authentic right through, and he's the only one who's authentic. All right, all the others. None of the others were left for a week to their own devices, filming themselves. None of them. Okay? Zero. He's the only genuine one. Even still, yes, as far as survival techniques are concerned, you know, like Dave Canterbury and that, yeah, they've got great techniques to teach, but if you're on a TV show, then, you know, even with Les Stroud, they knew where he was. They knew he was only going to be there for a week. So if he didn't turn up at the pickup point after a week, they knew roughly where he was and they could search for him. Right? So that's not a real survival situation. A real survival situation, to me, a serious, real survival situation is where you are lost. You don't know where you are, or you don't know the way to safety. Number one, you're lost, you don't know the way to safety. Number two, no one knows you're missing. Alright? Because if people know that you're missing, they know to look for you and probably will find you. They may not find you alive, they might find you dead, but they will eventually probably find you. So you have to be completely lost. No one knows where you are. Yeah, that's a real survival situation. How many people, honestly, how many people can say, yes, I've been in a serious survival situation? I don't believe you. Okay? I just don't. The amount of people who've been in a serious survival situation I'd probably a very, very small number, right? And that survived, I'm talking about, and lived to tell the tale, right? And typically, the reason why they were in that situation is because of stupidity, all right? Or I won't say stupidity, okay? I'll say ignorance, all right? total ignorance about the environment that they were in, and definitely about how to survive in it. All right. There's nothing more tragic than grown adults who take children into situations that they shouldn't be in. All right. That's the real tragedy, is when children die through no fault of their own because of their parent, because of the adults who yeah, who just don't know what they're doing. Now, if I was going to pick, so we'll get into the number one survival tool, which is a knife. All right, a knife. All right. In my opinion, the best survival knife that most people can afford, all right, that most people can afford, is the Becker BK7. It's big enough to do the big stuff. It's small enough to do the small stuff, and it's just yeah. There are people who've broken it, but God knows what they were doing. All right. Now, because the BK7 also comes with sharpening stone and the BK, what is it, 13, which is a knife for the really small stuff. Okay, like, I just cut up food with this. I don't really use it for anything else. Now, I say that this is the best survival knife that most people can afford, with a qualification. It is the best survival knife that people can afford, but, and I'm being, probably most knife people, they love customising their stuff. Right? If you're a gear guy, you love customising your stuff. You will notice they are not the handle scales that come with it. The handle scales that come with it are just cheap shit plastic. I don't even know what the official term is for these things, but they are just so smooth and slippery. I think they're dangerous. All right, I'll just come out and say it. The handle scales that the BK7 comes out with are dangerous. They make this knife dangerous. All right, if you can't get a decent grip on your knife, yeah. And the last thing you want is, if you're in the middle of nowhere, to give yourself an open wound. That is not a good place to be. Now, the other things that you will change if you give a crap is the actual nuts and bolts that come with, that hold the handle scales on, because they are just black steel and they rust in no time, especially if you're in the tropics like I am. The knife itself, it does get rust, but it's not. It's just the light surface rust. This one's got some light. I took the coating off it because that's rubbish, that coating. Seriously, I'm just going to take this surface rust off it again. So I put stainless steel nuts and bolts. I've got some on order actually that I didn't even know they were available. There's a replacement stainless nut and bolt kit. Hopefully, because these nuts don't actually a bit too small for the hex. There. The other thing that you need to replace, and I'm waiting for some of the hardware for my Kydex sheath, because I've got a couple of pieces of Kydex that turned up, but I haven't got the eyelets and the Chicago screws and the what's it called, for the sheath. This is, you know what? It's well made, but personally I think it's just a piece of crap. I mean, it's just, what, Kayla, what are you people, seriously, what kind of drugs are you smoking to, or injecting? You've got to be on hard drugs to, it's such a wonderful knife with so much potential. These handle scales are canvas micarta. Yeah, love it. And the wetter it gets, the grippier it gets. Yeah, but seriously, K-Bar, come on. Yeah. My second choice is the SRK, Cold Steel SRK. It's been around for decades, like literally decades, 30 plus years or something like that. It's a fantastic knife. You know what? If you're interested in survival, then you would be aware of Survival Lily. Well, you know what? Lily, I think, carried this knife for a long time before she designed her own, which is pretty much a copy of this, or it appears to be, with a shit of steel. And but I still love you, Lily. Sorry. She's very good. Yeah, she knows what she's talking about. No doubt about it. She looks like a female Millhouse, if you know what I'm talking about. But yeah, she's real geeky. But hey, she knows the shit. Kudos, Lily. I love you. Yeah. So there's a few different steels that it's available in. I don't know if it's available in 3V. You've got it in what's this one in? This one's in so this one's, I don't know. This one's got Japan on it. So this one's made in Japan. I think that's it's not Oz 8. It's I can't remember what the steel's called. What is it? Oz 8? Yeah, it's a Japanese steel anyway. It's made in Japan. This one is Sanmai 3, so it's VG10 sandwiched between, I don't know, some softer stainless steels that doesn't rust. It's beautiful, and it's got a different grind. This one's got a concave grind, and this one's got a saber grind. So, but profile wise they're exactly the same. Fantastic knives, highly recommend them. You can see that there is a difference. The cutting edge is longer on that one. Yeah, fantastic knives. Let me tell you, this one here, hey, it's dirt cheap, and yeah, and guess what? The sheaths, fantastic sheaths. This thing's half the price of this, and yeah. Cold Steel know how to make sheath. K-Bar don't. Let's see, what else do I need to cover? Yeah, so if you're thinking about travelling in the outback in Australia, you really do need to do your research, because even local people, even people who've grown up in the outback, just living and growing up in the outback doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to survive in a desperate situation, because some people are just still ignorant. Even if they're in the middle of that environment, they're ignorant of the dangers and the possibilities of what can kill you. Now, so I've said that the number one cause of death is dehydration. I have absolutely no doubt. The other danger that I always fear is snakes. We have got the 10 most venomous snakes in the world. Not the 10 deadliest, but the 10 most venomous. Because most of the time they are not aggressive, they're not interested in you. If they can't pass you down their gullet, then they're not interested in you. They don't want to know you. They're only interested in things that they can swallow. So, if I am in an area where I think, depends on what time of year it is. During the breeding season, some of them can get a bit aggressive, and that's not because they want to attack you, that's because they're being defensive. These are snake-proof boots, so snakes can't bite through them, right? Well, most snakes can't bite through them. I don't know, if you get a really massive snake, you might be able to do, but they are snake-proof boots. I've never had a snake try and bite them, so I can't say that's a fact, but the brand is Rocky. Rocky have been around for a very, very long time. It's an American brand. They are relatively cheap, and I have to say that they are really light considering their size, and they are really comfortable. So I highly recommend these. If you like me, you freak out about getting bitten by a snake, then get a set of these. Mate, you can't go wrong. Snakes, we do have antivenines for every snake species in Australia, deadly. So the chances of dying from the snake bite are pretty slim if you are able to get assistance, you know, within a reasonable time, then again, you got more chances. You probably got more chance of being dying from getting hit on the head by a coconut than dying from a snake bite. As long as you don't do anything stupid, all right. Again, it comes back to don't do anything stupid. Which, but anyway, so that's pretty much what I've got to say about surviving in the outback. And wear a large brimmed hat, like really, you know, something light, you know, like this, but without the Stetson design. Now, the other thing is, if you are in Australia and you are interested in the outdoors and aren't a vegan and you know, social justice warrior snowflake, consider joining the Shooters, Fishers and Farmers Party. Alright, man was made to fish and hunt. If, surprisingly, and I was surprised by this, a yearly membership of the party only costs $10. $10 a year, alright, to be a part of something that needs support, alright, because our rights as recreational fishers and as recreational shooters, it's just constantly under attack. So join the Shooters, Fishers and Farmers Party. Right? It's $10 a year and you won't regret it, because hey, then numbers are being counted. Right? Politicians care about one thing and one thing only, keeping their asses in that seat. And if their numbers are slowly dwindling, they go, why? Well, it's because you don't represent what we value. And then they go, oh, I better just do a big turnaround, you know, do a big flip-flop and start representing your values. That's the reality. But anyway, enough of politics. So if you are considering coming to Australia and travelling in the outback, do your research, all right? Do your research. Carry, 10 times the water that you need. There's nothing wrong with that. Do your research about the region that you're going into, that you want to go into. What part of the year shouldn't you be there? All right? Don't come to Northern Australia during the wet season, because you're going to get hit by floods and cyclones. Not necessarily, you probably won't, but if it does happen, guess what? And you completely ignorant of the fact that we get, you call them hurricanes, we call them cyclones. We get big ones, right? Really big ones, really destructive ones. So do your research. And ignorance is the biggest reason for death, all right? Really, knowledge is power. If you know about all the possibilities, if you're aware of all the possibilities, right, you can do something about that. You can educate yourself on what to do if one of those contingencies occurs, all right? Contingency planning. Do it. And for God's sake, don't just rent some old shit box, because one of the main reasons for people perishing in the outback is their car is not roadworthy, all right? Their car can't cope with the conditions here in Australia. There's a reason why Nissan and Toyota and I think Mitsubishi and whoever, they test their four-wheel drives here, because some of the worst conditions in the world are here. When you've got a road that's just full of corrugations, if you don't know how to drive on a corrugated road, your vehicle will fall apart. You're going to destroy it, okay? So educate yourself before you come here, before you travel here, otherwise you could possibly die. Because if your vehicle breaks down on a dirt road in the outback and you haven't got enough water with you and you haven't got the ability to create a shelter, right? Or you've got a shelter from the sun, you're going to be cooked. In 2 days, you're going to die. If you don't have water, right, in the height of summer here in Australia, you're going to die. The other thing is, in the outback, it gets cold at night. All right, it might be 40 degrees, 50 degrees during the day, but guess what? When that sun goes down, bang, the temperature really drops. So, you know, people say, oh, I'll go out there in shorts and, you know, a singlet or a t-shirt and flip-flops, what we call thongs. I'll be right. No. You need to take warm clothing with you if you're going in the outback because, you know, it gets cold in the desert, any desert. So anyway, I've said enough. Please, do your research. Be safe, all right? We don't want you coming here dying, all right? Nobody wants that. You don't want that. So I've said enough. I'll do more on the survival aspect later. But anyway, that's enough for now. So see you later.